We left off yesterday with a more widespread persecution of the church in Jerusalem, which causes the members to start fleeing in different directions. One of them was Philip, as we heard at the end of the last first reading yesterday, where he travels to Samaria, does many signs and wonders, and the people rejoice and are glad to accept the word through which Philip is given them. Now today, as we continue on in chapter 8 of the Acts of the Apostles, again, a very unique story. We have an Ethiopian eunuch who is in charge of the queen of the Ethiopians, in charge of the treasury. Okay, so we got the accountant. All right. Here's the important fact that's not given in this first reading that will help us to interpret how to make of this. Okay. Eunuchs, even Jewish eunuchs, okay, were not full-fledged members of God's people in the Old Testament, okay? They couldn't enter into the temple area because of their condition, okay? So if you don't know what a eunuch is, kind of put it a little bit more, beat around the bush here. Eunuchs, let's just say their job was to remain totally dedicated to the office of the king or the queen. Okay, and by fully dedicated, they weren't distracted by marriage, and they weren't distracted by women. Okay, and I'll let you fill in the pieces there. Okay, all right. So that's the condition that they have. Okay, and so they weren't. They were partially members of God's people, but not full members, because they couldn't approach the temple and worship in the temple. All right. So that's this person, okay, a Gentile who is attracted to the one God of Israel. That's why he's going to Jerusalem to partially worship, okay. And like I said, there's only so much he could do. He's returning back to Ethiopia. The Spirit drives Philip to meet him, okay. And as they're riding along, Philip is kind of like running alongside his caravan, And what is he doing? The eunuch is reading scripture, but he needs help to read it. So again, go back to the Gospel of Luke. On the way to Emmaus, okay, Jesus approaches the two individuals going to Emmaus, and what does Jesus do? He breaks open the scripture to them. He explains how the Messiah needed to suffer, die, and rise on the third day. He's opening scripture to him. And then when Jesus appears to the apostles, it was just this Sunday's gospel reading, he appears to the apostles, okay, what does he do? He breaks open scripture to them, again, to tell them where the Messiah needed to suffer and die and rise from the dead. And now, once again, the ministry of Jesus, breaking open the scripture, now continues through Philip. And so the eunuch is reading the passage, and he's reading from Isaiah 50, I want to say like 56. It's the suffering servant. Okay, Luke gives us the scripture that the eunuch is having trouble with. Like a sheep he was led to the slaughter, as a lamb before its shearers is silent, and so forth and so forth. He doesn't understand, and so Christ comes through Philip. Christ works through Philip to what? To break open the scriptures again. And now the eunuch rejoices. And now, again, this is why I mentioned about the fact that eunuchs couldn't fully enter into the temple area. Because at the end, when everything's said and done, the eunuch filled with joy, and then he sees water. And he's like, hey, Philip, what's preventing me from getting baptized? And the answer is quite simple, nothing. You can now be a full-fledged member of God's people because of Christ, because of the suffering servant. So that's how the passage is looked at. Very important. And again, what happens now after the baptism? The eunuch returns to Ethiopia. What do you think he's going to be doing? The gospel message continues to spread. But just imagine. First of all, I always say, like I said on Sunday, at least in some of the masses, what it would have been like to have Jesus break open the Scripture. That must have been really something. I mean, we hear good people break open the Scriptures, but they're not Jesus, right? But again, always remember that as we read Scripture, as we study Scripture, that Christ, the ministry of Christ, continues on today, through those individuals. And hopefully it continues on with us. And again, we eventually will move on in this story of the great Acts of the Apostles to see now as the church is being spread. Again, we're going to see what comes next. May God bless you.